Heyo, Outliers, Niiamah Shang here, and thank you so much for letting me be a part of your journey. Sorry if that was in your ears really full, but I am just I'm fully into this conversation here. We have an opportunity to just slow down with one of our outliers here. You got a chance to experience her on an Outliers Edge roundtable beforehand, and now we're spending some time with Deb. Deb, let me make sure I'm getting your last name. Is it Donig? Yeah, Deb Donig here. Deb, let's bring you back into this space here. I'll ask you the question that I love to ask as we get things started. Why don't you let us know more about you and the game that you're playing? Give Outliers a refresher, and as well as bring in new people who didn't get a chance to listen to the episode.
Yeah, you bet. Well, I'll just start off by thanking you very much for allowing me into this conversation and allowing me into the space. It's really a pleasure to be here, and it's really an honor to get to talk to your audience. I heard somebody say a couple of weeks ago in another podcast that I was listening to that, people are taking like an hour out of their day to listen to this conversation. And when I'm recording now, I don't think about, maybe the hundreds or thousands of people who listen to you. I know that you have such a large audience. I think about like the one person who's taking time out of their day to spend time listening to us. So I appreciate you, and I appreciate this audience for taking that time, for taking the conversation seriously, and for allowing me to speak to you. Um, you know, if you asked me that question, a couple of years ago, I would have started off with what I do professionally. But I'll say that the orienting value around everything I do, professionally and otherwise, is building community. I think that that's the most important thing that I can do, serving communities that I can serve, being part of the communities that allow me to participate in those communities. And in the context of my life, the most important thing I've done is participate and serve communities. Now, in the context of what I do professionally, that community is increasingly oriented toward a group of people who, and the title of this podcast is Powerful Service, who are looking to lend their talent and their time and their professional careers to creating a structure in the tech industry that would allow our tech to do better. Now, I'm what's called a tech critic in some circles, and I don't necessarily like that term because that term puts me in opposition to the people who are creating tech. And I don't oppose tech. I love tech. I just want it to do better, and I want it to better serve our communities and our human values. And I think that we can get there. And what I try to do is I try to build a community of people, joining other people who have done this so profoundly to help people imagine how our tech can serve us better. So one of the things I like to say is that before we can build anything, we first have to imagine it. We can't build a technology without imagining what that technology might look like and what it might do. Now, we have a vision of technology as creating a better future, right? If we think about what a tech product is, many people immediately go to futurism or futuristic technology. That's the Jetsons. And we're right to do that because why would you create a technology that would move us into the past or that would make the future worse, right? So we already have the idea that our tech should make the world a better place. But if we think about which technologies we actually invite into our lives, frequently they serve a value that maybe doesn't make our world a better place, or maybe is marketed as making our world a better place. But fundamentally, if we take a long step back and see what that tech has done in our lives, it's made life worse for a lot of people while making it better for a very small group of people. So, in that spirit of building community, I want us to better think about how we can form a community of service around what we decide to adopt in terms of our tech, and also how we can create a community of similarly minded people. And that community is growing to create checks and balances and a better vision of technology, one that better serves our human values.
Oh, Deb. All right. So, firstly, thank you for playing the game that you play. I think that there was a lot that was running through me as you were talking here. And if you're cool with that, I want to just play into each step along the way. You good with
Go
that?
for it. Yeah,
All right, cool.
absolutely.
So there's like a few things, and I'm thinking about this from the standpoint of being someone who's leading my own movement and looking at the areas where I felt like it's been successful, the areas where I've second guessed, the areas where I'm like, shouldn't this be taken off more, so on and so forth, right? And what I really got with what you just said here is like one, you recognize that like at the core of everything you do is all around community and building community. And so you've been like building that skill in many different ways over for as long as you've been doing this. Let me first check in. Like, does that sound accurate? Does that feel real?
It's a value of mine, building
Yeah.
community everywhere. And
Yeah.
professionally, I think that that's the most important thing that I could be doing.
Yeah. I feel you on that. So I want to get into like some of the different ways that you're building community because I think that the way that community looks and feels is actually like we have our own preconceived notions around what that is. And the more that I spend time with people, I'm like, oh, this like community actually has a lot of different like ways that it can live. So why don't we, before I like compound too many questions, why don't I ask you first, like, what's your flavor of community building? What does it look like in the way that you're doing it?
It's a great question. And I think that there's a lot of different ways I can answer that question. But I'll start off by maybe just talking a little bit about one of the most important corrections that I've had in the direction that I've been going and how that rerouting has, I think, made me better able to serve a community. I'm an academic, and as an academic, the thing that we are measured by is what we write. And for a while, I was trying to write the wittiest, cleverest, most interesting, astute, idiosyncratic material I could that could speak to the idiosyncratic desires and conversations in academia. And in academia, the more kind of mental gymnastics you're able to do to reach a conclusion that nobody else has thought of, the better thinker you are evaluated as being. And I started, and I wrote my first book, which is the outcome of the dissertation manuscript that I wrote during my PhD, with that kind of idea. I wanted to demonstrate how intellectually agile I was. And it's a good book, but I never published it because it was never clever enough and it was never incisive enough. And I spent some time writing and publishing in that direction. And when it came to my second book, I made a decision to do something differently. And this is the book I'm writing right now on ethics and technology and the future of the community of people who are interested and dedicated to um, making an intervention tech. I said, I don't want to write the best book. I don't want to write the most clever book. I don't want to write the book where all of the academics gather around my book and say how witty this person it must be. The book I wanted to write was intended to do something very different, which is just start a conversation. I just wanted to start a conversation. I wanted to start a conversation where not people in the ivory tower, but people in the street and people in beer halls and people who are actually creating technologies and people who are trying to learn about them and undergraduates who are going to be the future of our workforce, the next generation of tech workers and of workers in this civic communities and in civil society and nonprofits and elsewhere, creators could read. And the difference between writing a book where you are trying to be the smartest person in the room and a book where you're just trying to start a conversation to allow other people to share a vocabulary and a community of ideas is very, very vast. And I'm so grateful that I have a chance to take this new direction and that that discovery of that new direction came to me at this critical moment where I think we are in need of coming together and building a community around these ideas.
So this is fun for me as you're saying this here because you talked about being. I also have written a book, and I also got to the place where it's like 200 pages, had all these different assessments, all that, and I got to the end of it, I was like, eh, like it's there, it can help, and like I'm sure it will help people, but there was something in there that I felt it was missing the mark, right? And so when you talk about this correction, I what's coming to me is that like the correction not only seemed like it took you down the place of like, all right, how do I go from trying to like come off as the smartest person in the room to like how do I actually like affect change? And if I'm getting you right, the effect and change is coming from the standpoint of like let's just start a conversation. It doesn't matter. Like I don't feel any attachment to what the change is, but it just feels like it's like, oh, we can actually there's something that's actually coming out of this in a real world tangible way as a result of like the way that you're choosing to write now that didn't exist beforehand. Let me check and see before I go off and start asserting things that are not true. Can you just calibrate me? How does that align?
I love the direction you're taking this. You know, the word that comes to mind, the term that comes to mind is thought leader, right? We think
Mm.
of thought leaders and we think of people who make these grand pronouncements. But if I think about the people who were true thought leaders in their time, right? And I think of people who were truly prophetic, Abraham Lincoln, right? Martin Luther King Jr. I think of people who, you know, were able to do something quite different. And I don't want to get biblical about this, but I do think that there is the concept of something called prophecy, not as a fortune teller or a future teller, but I think about what that kind of prophet is. As somebody, again, the two that come to mind immediately for me are Martin Luther King Jr., Abraham Lincoln. And I think about what those people were able to do. And what they were able to do is use language to start a conversation. They were able to use language to paint a vision of the world as it could or should be, a world that did not exist yet. And what they were able to do is paint that world so vividly that people were willing to come together and they were able to see that world so vividly that they participated in building it. That's prophecy. Prophecy isn't future telling. It's not grand pronouncements. It is the ability to get people together to start that conversation and to build toward a world that could or should be, but isn't here yet. To get people to see the possibility of that world and to build it. And that's, I think, a very different skill set than the pomposity of what I try to do in my first book, right? Which is to be the smartest person in the room. And I love that idea. Again, I'm not talking about something biblical. You can follow this conversation even if you don't, follow any particular religion. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the ability to articulate a vision and to bring people together around that vision and to enable and to equip that community to build something for themselves beyond what any individual person can pronounce or do. That's exciting to me.
Oh man, that's super exciting. That like, like it's fun as you're saying this. I'm like, oh, I've missed being in spaces where like that's like the premise of what we're actively going for. I think I'm in spaces where like it's present or it's in the room, but it's not as present as what you just said. So I'm glad that you named it. Glad that you named it right here. I like this distinction you have around prophecy overall. And I think like there's a lot of trailblazers out here. We're visionary leaders, right? However, there's something in what you're saying that I want to keep pulling out some of the distinction because there's it's almost like the commodity of being a visionary leader versus actually being like leading something in a visionary way. As we were talking, I had four distinctions coming through my mind, and we're not to go into it, but I want to share it because there was times where I'd aimed to be a thought leader, and I was recognizing, I'm like, why haven't I put out any new like content? I do the podcast that goes out there, but it's just conversations that are taking place. And while you were talking, it made me think about. I came up with four different distinctions. So it was like, there's thought leadership. Well, there's a thought leader, but then there may be an experience curator, and there may be a conversation starter, and then I got to possibility creator. And all four of them might have some element of being a visionary leader, visionary thinking, putting out things for people to see differently than the experiences that they're having. But I could see all like the other three, experience curator, conversation starter, possibility creator, having inviting a different way of being in relationship with self and others
Mm.
that thought leader didn't. I'm curious how you may look at yourself in it, and it's because right now you said you've talked about the importance of language, and so like right now I'm like, oh, what is the language for this thing that goes in my mind? I won't say beyond, but it's a different path than thought leadership, and creates a new space. So very curious if you have any responses to that, or if you've been thinking about yourself around like what is this thing that you're off there doing? Are you prophecy realizing like there's something to this.
Yeah, well, I'm a professor of English literature by training, so words are my, bread and butter. I think that. one trait that I really value in a good thought leader is to create a shared vocabulary within a community where everybody in that community has the language and the efficacious symbolic system to name a certain reality. One of the things that we kind of take for granted in literary culture as scholars of language is that there's a certain dimension of reality that's not tangible until we can name things. And giving something a name or a label is a way to both realize and sharpen our understanding of that thing, of that phenomenon, and also create a conversation or discussion around it. And every semester, when I teach a class on ethics and human rights, which I do at Berkeley, I get a student who says, yeah, I'm never going to use these frameworks. I'm never going to use these ethical principles. I these things are too abstract for me to understand. And, I'm not really involved in that anyway. I do business analytics or something like that. And I say, okay, that's totally fine. You can never use these concepts again. But what I hope that you come away with from this class is the vocabulary to name things. Because even if you eschew it, even if you deny it, even if you disavow these ideas, I want you to come away with the ability to name them. And when you name something, you provide it a kind of reality. You give it a label, a categorical understanding of that concept. So if we think about the world, and just to take a step back for a second, and I'll nosedive into your question after I take this little detour. If we think about the world, our world is filled with so many phenomena that our senses have to capture at every single moment. It's too much phenomena for us to be able to really metabolize. And so what we do is we look around the world and we create categories for what that world embodies or entails. So, for example, it would be impossible for me to walk around all day and scrutinize each and every object behind me, right? And if you are listening to this in the audio medium, I have a big bookshelf behind me, a very, very messy bookshelf. If I were to have to go through and say, well, that thing has a large bound set of leaflet kind of things, and it's got a spine in the back, and it's got a title on it, that is a book. And that thing next to it, it's got a bunch of leaflet kinds of things, and it's all bound together and collected, and it's got a title on that, and that is also a book, right? And do that for the 1,000 books in the background, that would be my entire day. We don't do that. We just label things and call it a book, right? And that is how we get through the world. And if we do this too precisely, then we call that caricature or we call it stereotype when we do it in a negative way. But when we take the world and we are able to label things, put names on them, then we're able to understand what we're dealing with on a large categorical level. And this is the basis of abstract reasoning. This is the basis by which we start to know and understand and interpret, make sense of, and therefore start to define and invent in our world. So I want us to have a shared vocabulary as a community so that we can discuss that world on its own terms and as a shared community come up with a deliberation about how we want to reckon with and I hope better the world that we're dealing with. We can only do that with a shared vocabulary. And I think that the point of thought leadership is to create that shared vocabulary. Again, that's a very different thing than trying to be the smartest person in the world. But if we think about this as community and what are we going to share together as a language and how are we going to use that shared language to communicate with one another about what we aspirationally want to do with the world, then I think that that's a very powerful thing to be able to do.
Yeah, this is it's hitting me right now because as you're saying, as you're talking about this, it's making me think about it's taking me through the years of my professional journey and beyond. One of the things that I was talking about, I was thinking about is like if you name it, you can claim it, right? And there's some element of this here that it's not exactly what you're saying, but there's some component where you're talking to outliers and trailblazers, and one of the things that we have, one of the common things that happens that like we so distinctly want to be seen. At the same time, we also like really resist being put into a box at the same time. And so like I think about that element of like what you've given here is when you talked about like the label and the simplicity that comes along with it and our ability to then be able to move on to the next portion of it. Um, what I'm taking from, well, there's many things, but one of the things I'm feeling right now is like, oh, the label in and of itself is not off. It's not a bad thing. It's actually very, very helpful to be able to label it. The element of doing the work to create a shared vocabulary around what you want that label to be, or that also like invokes the kind of aspiration or the kind of vision that you're looking for, like is important. And I'm thinking about this from the community standpoint here. Honestly, I'm reflecting on outliers right now. I call this thing Outliers Edge. Outliers is a generally made up label. I made it up, but like people come in and they it means something to them. There's something in there where like we now have this shared vocabulary where we'll come on a podcast together and we'll use the word outliers and they can then create something from it. And I feel like we're in that kind of a space right now. Is that aligned with what you're saying, Deb? I'm trying to see if I can make this real. And like, am I what part like
Yeah.
how like I want to lean into this.
This is really important. And I want to speak to this, especially to the people who are listening to this who are leaders. I'm going to get very vulnerable here. My entire life, I felt like I have never fit into a box. And that's actually very painful. To not feel like you ever fit in is a very, very painful feeling. I think that human beings have an innate need for belonging, that much of our search is for belonging. And so, for those of you who are out there listening and have not felt like you know which box you fit into, I feel that pain. I really do. And I feel a little bit of tension here because, on the one hand, thought leadership and the idea of being a trailblazer is about going where somebody else hasn't gone before, going off that beaten track and finding a way to talk about things, a way to do things, a product that is brand new. That's a very lonely place to be, by the way, because if you're doing that right, you're thinking about things that nobody else has thought about, and you're probably doing it on your own. And that's very, very lonely. There's nobody to talk to if nobody else is thinking the same things that you are. On the other hand, there's another way to think about this, which is none of us want to be fit in a box, and certainly leaders don't want to fit in a box. One of the healthiest things for me is to understand that actually it's not that I can't fit in a box, which is very lonely. It's that I fit into so many boxes that I don't want to just be in one. And again, that's a different framing. Rather than saying I don't fit in anywhere, there's no place for me, you could say, gosh, I fit into so many of these places. And you can actually leverage that because one of the challenges of being a thought leader is that there is no path, there is no pattern to follow. There's a lot of kind of digging around and poking around and trying to figure out which way to go because you don't feel like you have a model. But what if instead you said, I have so many models to pick from, and I can pick from all of the things that are successful across all of these different boxes. I don't have to fit in one box, but I can celebrate my ability to belong to so many of these boxes and that I don't just have to pick one. You don't just have to pick one. Again, the different framing, same phenomenon, different framing. And I think that maybe the latter can be helpful to people in providing them an alternative to a framing that I think sometimes leads people to feel a lot of loneliness and a lot of the sense of being misshapen or malformed or something.
So Deb, you got a smile on my face as you're speaking. Like just my movement, everything I do is all about belonging. I think that is ultimately where I live. And there's something in the way that you uplifted the conversation and you created the path of like um I have a saying where I'm like the opposite is also true, right? So what I heard from you is like it's like all right, we can look and say that there's no box from us, but the opposite is also true. Like there's every box out there. There's so many different boxes out there, and at the end of the day, we might feel the same way, but like we can frame it. We can choose a different way of looking at it. Yeah, Deb, is there something you want to say to that?
No, I love what
Okay.
you're saying.
Yeah.
Keep going.
One of the things that I'm enjoying about like speaking with you in particular is that you have a standard that you hold things to, right? And I'm asserting this here, but I feel that there's a standard. And the standard that I hear is like what if we just like did it better? What if we just like made like what if there was no problem, but it could be better? And what if we didn't like settle for what is or what has been or what we have known, and instead we like actually allow ourselves to like go like look at everything as an opportunity to make it better. And I kind of felt that even here with like the framing, right? It's like, look, yeah, there's a way you can look at this, but like you also have this awesome opportunity here where it's like you can actually go into every box, right? And so given that there's like this is one of the things I say to people where I'm like, just so you know, it's really hard to be with me because like while even though I create a lot of belonging, I'm like, what do you want to do with that? You know, like you can be in every box. So what do you want to do? And I feel like that's kind of like the questions that you ask. You're like, great, we can make technology, it can make things easier and all that stuff. But like, what do we want to do with this? Like, can we just lift this up to something here? And I'm getting that feel from you. What are your thoughts on that, Deb?
I think that this world could be so many different things other than what it is.
Mm,
And,
mm.
here's one of the problems. I like the idea of prophecy as helping a community realize what it could or should become and helping the community move toward that goal. I think it has to be a community goal. I don't think that what a thought leader could do or should do is define for the group where they ought to go. I think that the thought leader is somebody who really listens to what the group wants and helps move in that direction. Now, this is not a advertisement for tyranny of the majority, right? That's not what I'm advertising here. But what if somebody could take the best ideas from a community, bring them together, and create that shared vocabulary for people? That's a beautiful thing. When it comes to the idea of prophecy, I don't think, to go back to what I was saying earlier, I'm not defining prophecy as fortune telling. But there is a really interesting dimension of what's happening right now, particularly in tech around fortune telling and around prophecy and around prognostication. Now, I don't myself prophesize. I think that prophecy is the lowest form of journalism and prognostication. Its ugly stepsister is the scourge of academia.
What is prognostication? What does that mean?
Prognostication is trying to figure out where things are ultimately going to go. Um, but there's the funny thing happening in the tech sector right now, which is that, somebody gets to prognosticate, and they make 24 or 25 predictions. And of the 25 predictions that they make, 24 are wrong, but one of them is right. And they say, you see, I am a good predictor, right? They got that one unicorn company. And so they are a great fortune teller. They're a great predictor, even though they got 24 things wrong. They got the one thing right. And they lost, hundreds of millions of dollars on those 24, but the one made them $1 billion. And so they are considered by our culture to be a good fortune teller. The funny thing that happens, however, is that in a market where you're not just predicting things, you're A, creating the technologies to begin with, and B, you're creating the market that buys those technologies, funds those technologies, and then sees the fruition of those companies and then benefits from those companies. That's not prediction. It's like as though I walked into a restaurant and I sat down with my dining companion and I said to that person, "What should we order for dessert?" There are four things on the menu. And the person says, I don't know, you predict what they'll serve for dessert. And I say to the server, we're going to have vanilla and I'm going to pay for vanilla. And they deliver vanilla, wouldn't you know it, to the table. That's not prediction. That is me designing the outcome. And that is what's happening in our tech culture right now. People who are leaders are funding the outcome, they're selecting the outcome, they are designing the outcome, and then they get to say that they predicted the outcome. I mean, that is what we call in gambling circuits a fixed game. And I think that there are enough of us who if we understand that, can understand as well that the technologies that are getting designed may not be the technologies that are best suited to develop our community and to move our community in the direction that the rest of us want to go. And I think that there's a powerful opportunity right now. And it is somewhat, I think, crucial to this moment to figure out for the community what we actually want, apart from what's on the menu and what somebody else is ordering. Because they're predicting something and they have the ability to make that thing so. And if we want it otherwise, then we have to design other options. We have to believe in those options. We have to collectively organize around those options, and then we have to push for those options to be on the menu for us to choose as well.
Okay, Deb. So now you got me. I'm gonna stay with this. We're gonna go deeper on this if you're good with this. Okay.
Sure.
Um, so you have me in a space right now where I'm being practical around this, and I'm like, okay, a part of me is like, if you can't beat them, then join them, right? In the sense of like, okay, what if we got out of the game of predicting at all, stop pretending we were predicting, and just said like, this is the future that I want to design, and then like learn what it takes and to actually go and just create said future, right? Because that's what I feel like I'm hearing. You're like that's this is what they're doing. They're like, hey, I think this is going to be it. I've organized behind it. I've organized a team, employees, funding, government regulations, whatever it is I needed to do to make this thing a reality. And they chose it and they went for it. So when you first started talking, I was like, okay, then why not play that game? And then you brought in something, and you might actually still be saying this, so I want to make sure that I'm leaning into it. And Deb, I'm asking because I want to deeply impact. I want it like there's things that you're talking about right now where I'm like, okay, I've been trying to make up what the way forward is, and there's elements of what you're talking about where I'm like, I need to plug it. I would like to plug into a different vehicle to be able to bring the visions that I see out to life. So you talked about collective organizing and so on and so forth, and I'm just wondering, like, what does this like? How does this come to be when you start designing not from one person, but designing through a community? And you brought up like Martin Luther King earlier, Martin Luther King Jr. earlier. I'm like, that's like designing through a community of a whole country, and so I kind of look at it in I'm deeply, deeply not just curious, I want to see what it is if I wanted to play with this or to start like implementing this like intentionally. Um, how does that actually go about working? And I hope I'm asking the question in a way that you can answer this. There's just some elements of this where I'm like, this sounds really good. I want it. How does this actually happen?
Yeah, is the question around community building and organizing, how does that happen? How does that work? Or is the question specifically around building better futures in tech?
Yeah, I think it's about building better futures. Like the in tech part overall, like I see how that's playing in. I want to, if you're good with that, I'd like to take it out of the in tech portion because like
Mhm.
that's giving us like a point to come in. Like I think we can all see what's happening in the world of tech. Um, but like I wouldn't say that what you're describing is dissimilar from many other things. If I think about like politics, if I think about like other industries, like it feels like there's a type of leadership that comes out that says, hey, this is where I see the future going. And those leaders are then able to organize resources behind that and then to be able to make that into fruition. However, it does feel like it's like one individual kind of pulling everyone forward. And like, at least in America, that like individual like leader story gets really like magnified. You're offering something different, it feels like to me. And you're offering like, what if we created it? And what would it take it for us to make this come to life through the shared vocabulary, but also through like organizing ourselves and or at least organizing collectively. And there's some nuance in there where I'm like, how does this actually play out? And if so, and I'm in on this, right? But I'm like, it almost feels like you talked about the entire ecosystem from start to finish in the tech world, and I'm curious about what that looks like otherwise. Does that make sense? Is it
Yeah,
more poignant in the question?
I get what you're saying. I'd love to
Yeah.
hear your thoughts on this too, as somebody who builds community, right? But I think in our culture, and this might be human culture, I don't know that it's necessarily located in American culture or Western culture, but I can't speak to universal human culture. I want to have a little bit of humility on that, so I'll just speak to the culture that I'm familiar with here in the United States and the literature that I'm familiar with, which is a literature written primarily in English or translated into English that I know about. And I start off with literature because one thing that we love in our stories is a protagonist. Virtually every story I know about a triumph of community building is pivoted around one protagonist. I talked about two protagonists already in different stories, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Abraham Lincoln. But make no mistake, as wonderful and as brilliant as these leaders uh, most certainly were, and I don't want to detract from that, they were supported by, bolstered by, and part of communities created by, you know, thousands of people who contributed their skills, their time, their blood, their sweat, their tears, their lives to that movement. And we like these individual protagonists, particularly in the West. We like the idea of the kind of lone wolf genius. And that's how we build our stories. But the reality on the ground that maybe is harder to assimilate into the kind of stories that we like to tell is the contributions of individual members of that community over thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people to that cause. You can't forget the people who were cleaning houses, the people who, we honor at Gettysburg, the people who uh, came to the protests or joined in sitting and listening to the conversations, who were contributing their skills, their talent, their time, and whatever they had to that kind of cause. So I think about the multiplicity and diversity of leaders, and I don't think that there's any one single talent other than the ability to start a conversation that any of these people share. You know, Jose Andres, I hope I've got that name right, of the World Kitchen, uh, has a very different skill set than the two interlocutors that I have previously discussed. But he too has created a tremendous community through his talent, which is food and food culture and cooking. So my guess is anybody listening has a talent, something that you pride yourself in, some gift that you feel like you've been given. And any of those talents can be put in the service of a vision and of a cause. And any and all people, I think, have the capacity to both lead that cause and to contribute to it. And the cause is not possible without everybody communicating together and contributing that skill set. So I hope that this is an invitation for folks who say, well, I don't know that my skill set or what I'm good at or what I do professionally will really line up with the change that I want to make in the world. And the answer is that for a second, even as we hold on to those stories of the individual talent and the individual protagonist, we have to understand that what we might call minor characters in that background story play major roles, and the story is not possible without them. So I don't think that for me, there's any one talent or any one feature of character that I would want to say elevates somebody, makes them more equipped to contribute than anybody else. Again, we have this powerful way that we like to tell a story, but if we just scrutinize that story even the smallest bit, we see a whole cast of characters with a whole set of skill sets right behind it. And each of those people has their own story and could be just as easily, right, a protagonist in that story, and certainly has a story that I would want to hear, and that, they could certainly tell about how they've used that talent in service of building something important and good and brilliant. It's just a matter of figuring out how to bring that community together. And we have so many challenges in this, and we also have new technologies that allow us to do this. And I'll just say one more paragraph of thought, and if you give me just a second to complete this, and you've been very patient, I really appreciate. This is a bit more of a monologue than I would have liked, but I think that the important component across all of this is the ability to talk to one another across our differences. One of the pieces of writing that I just finished is about the unfortunate movement toward extremism and the increasing inability we have to talk to one another across the divides that we think that we have. And if we strip away all of the scaffolding to what a democracy is and all the political theory and all of the complexity that we've built on top of this idea, one basic component is that you have a group of people, especially in a liberal democracy where we're not an ethno-national state, where we have different value sets as communities, and we don't share kin necessarily. And so we have to come together across different cultural backgrounds and across different value sets to persuade one another to build something together. That's a really hard thing to do, especially when we don't necessarily all share the same values. To get somebody to say, well, I'm going to fund this value, or I'm going to get on board with that value, even though it's not my own, or I'm going to support this value, even though it may not necessarily benefit me directly. But that's the foundation of democracy, to be able not to agree together, but to be able to persuade one another to build something because we have enough in common to want to allow other people in our society to succeed, to support their values, and to persuade one another to be able to build that thing together. And so my hope, and what I'm really dedicated to right now, is the ability to talk to one another across those divides, to create a core cohesive middle ground where people can come together and talk, agree to disagree if it comes to that, but at least hear and understand what other people are saying, what they need, and to, in so doing, be able to build something bigger than ourselves together.
Yeah, I'm appreciative of you. We're gonna start wrapping up this conversation. I'm appreciative. I'm also like, if I permission to speak freely, um,
It's your show.
yeah, right. I like, yeah, thanks for reminding me of this. No, but like, the feelings inside, I'm irked, I'm excited, I'm confronted, and I'm grateful right now, all in one here. So you talked about a few things, and we're gonna wrap up here because of time, but you reminded me of a, a series of conversations that I started back in probably 2021. They were melting pot conversations, and they were, in my mind, designed to do a lot of what you were talking about. I ran out of the energy to keep holding space in that way, right? And part of, like, you see me now learning how do I create better systems, better people, so that, like, and part of what I'm recognizing through this, I'm like, there's too much I talk in this to make it actually sustainable for the types of transformations, types of opportunities, types of visions and realities that we could be creating together. And so I'm very, very grateful for you. Like, that element of, like, it could be better. We could, like, let's do it better, really is something that calls to me. It's very driving. It's like my beacon. It's like a lighthouse to me, of like not having to settle for what it is that we have. And Deb, I just want to say thank you for being one of the champions of that out there. Um, I think that we all know it's possible, but I'm not hearing it being said in the circles that I'm in enough. And so I'm just really grateful for you, Dad, for you have taken your career and transformed it into something where it goes beyond the work that you're doing professionally into the work that we all get a chance to benefit from. You literally have me thinking here, and I'm going to ask it because I think I would regret not asking it later on. It's a conceptual question, but you have me thinking about the stories of the single person protagonist, and I'm like, are there examples of, like, collective or group protagonists and those kinds of stories because I want to start to get to know those stories as well. Because it's in my mind, based on what we just said, I'm like, oh, we've seen examples of how this happens. It's actually the blueprint is laid out in these stories already. And I will come back to the melting pot and all that. You've sparked something that I did not think would be sparked. So I'm like, but at the same time, I'm really curious. I have no clue about even how to go find the answer to that group protagonist one. The best thing that come to mind is Avengers right now. I'm like, I'm like, is that why I like it? Because I'm like, all the stories are there. Any thoughts on that? And then we'll wrap for today.
I think, first of all, I don't know all the stories out there. I think that there's still great stories for me to read and great stories out there to be read. There's a couple that come to mind for me where we do have a collective storytelling or what's called in literary culture polyvocalism, right? The idea of multiple voices coming together. One of my favorite examples of this is George Saunders's Lincoln in the Bardo, where he brings together a cast of characters. And just to give readers a little bit of or listeners a little bit of context for this, Lincoln in the Bardo takes place in the moment where President Lincoln is about to go to war, send soldiers off to fight the Confederacy, which has seceded from the Union. And in that moment, for readers familiar with the history, Lincoln loses his beloved son, his favorite son, who dies. And he goes to a bardo. Bardo is a place where you bury your dead to hold his son for that one night. Again, the country's on the cusp of war. And what George Saunders does is he invokes all of the ghosts in the bardo. And so you hear this polyvocalism, all of these different people who are buried across all of the different communities who have a stake in the future of the United States in that particular moment as ghosts go through their lives and they talk about their vision for that country, what it could be, what it should be, what they're mourning, what they're hoping for. It's a beautiful book. And I think it's not just beautiful because it's a beautiful story that George Saunders does, and it's, formally inventive in the ways that only George Saunders can do. But it gets back to the foundational principles of this country. This country has never lived up to those principles fully, and I fully admit that. But the vision is beautiful and it's aspirational and it isn't completed, but it starts off with we, the people, right? Now, think about just how radical this is. In any previous country, the formative dimension of that country's sovereignty has been I, the monarch. That's what the United States is breaking from. I, the monarch, say this. But now, right, what Lincoln's fighting for and what this country was established on is the idea of we, the people. We, the people. That's polyvocalism. That's a story. That's a story about people coming together. And I think that, again, it's a powerful story. The United States is a very powerful story aspirationally that asks us if we really take its philosophy seriously, what we the people want, not what we the billionaires want, not what I the president want, not what the selected group of people in Congress want. We the people. What do we the people want the future of our community to be, right? And it's, again, an aspirationally beautiful prophetic idea that I hope that we, the people, continue to try to live up to. And, you know, George Saunders in the 21st century, writing Lincoln in the Bardo, recalls, I think, the ghost of that particular moment in that polyvocalism of ghosts in that Bardo. And that kind of story, I think, is a story that points us in a direction where we could, maybe should go. But it is a story of we, the people. And it's a beautiful story. It's a beautiful vision. And those of us who are living in this country have something, I think, to live up to if we, the people, choose to be here and to continue that vision.
Deb, I'm going to say thank you. And I think this is where we're going to end our conversation here today. Outliers, trailblazers, like take this in, see what opportunities come up here for you. Deb, anyone that wants to go deeper down your journey, down the path with you, that wants to join you in a community, wants to be a part of the story that we are telling together, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I just want to credit David Polgar, who has created a wonderful community called All Tech is Human, a community that I think does a lot of the things that I've talked about today. David is one of those great leaders who has the capacity, the skill, and the vision to create that. And he has founded this community. You can find me there if you have questions. I love to talk to people about their own career journey to help in whatever way I can. Please feel free to find me at All Tech is Human or at my Berkeley address, publicly available on the internet. And again, I think that there's power in community. So anybody who wants to join that community, interested or wants to learn more about the work, please feel free to hit me up there.
Deb, I am very grateful for you. You've changed things for me. I will share with that in the future, but just know that this conversation was deeply impactful for me. There are thoughts that I have not allowed myself to entertain for a very long time that have me stepping into what it is, the vision that I want to see of myself and what I want to be able to create with us. And so I thank you. Like the work you do is great. And thank you for giving us an opportunity to be in a conversation. You've started a new conversation inside my heart, is what I think I'm trying to say. And I'm like super excited for it. And also like, oh man. But, yeah, outliers. I hope like live in this conversation. Think about one person in your world who would really benefit from this, and please send this over to them. Let's let this conversation not just stay within our ears, but actually keep going out into the world and keep sparking new conversations. With that being said, remember this: until the next time we talk, be you on purpose. Journey on.